And I'll be there on your next ass. If you leave, I will follow you home and grab your cheek. If you listen to me, I will leave and grab your cheek. I will fix you out. When you eat your ass, I will follow you home and grab your cheek. If you spit on your hand, I will murder you all alive. I will murder you and eat your ass. So I just accidentally hit start streaming instead of start recording after my third failed attempt at starting this chapter read. And I don't know how many of you guys were there, but a lot of you just witnessed me doing a premature ejaculation on that stream. Oopsies, my bad. I meant to hit start recording. Every time I try to fucking read, I bleh, my mouth keeps getting tongue-tied. Fuck me. Anyways, you could see there, you saw that little fucking laughing guy. He just moved across because you guys are still in chat chit-chatting because I fucking false started. Anyways. All right, so, you're going to be seeing this tomorrow. I just canceled our Saturday stream because Sunday is looking like it's going to be a beast of a travel day, and Aiden is always looking out for my best interest, and he just thinks it's better to set myself up where we're traveling and I'm not, exhausted, and starting off, traveling can make you, whatever. So I just, rested, and, God, every time I try to start this, we're just going to go. I'm just going to keep going through. Anyways, new nails. But I recorded chapter 7 for you guys yesterday. That's already locked in for YouTube. That's already in there for you guys and will be deployed or whatever the fuck. On Saturday the 28th. And so this one will be just tomorrow, and hopefully I'll be more coherent tonight on stream. But anyways, I'm going to read chapter 6 for you guys right now. And you know what? If I fuck up the words, we're just going to power through. Because this is my third or fourth time trying to read the first fucking page of this chapter. So I'm just going to muscle through even if I fuck up. Okay, let's do this again. Chapter 6. All to outrun my desertion of you. March 2017. Jess. The contractors called again before 9. Something about permits, something about the fire code, something about the staircase that apparently wasn't wide enough for modern regulations. Jess scribbled half-legible notes onto the back of a receipt while balancing his phone between his shoulder and his ear, nodding in frustration. Right, so we're looking at another 2 weeks minimum for the inspection, the voice droned on. Maybe 3 if the inspector's backed up, which he usually is this time of year. Jess closed his eyes and pressed his fingers into his temple, where a headache had taken up permanent residence sometime around February. And there's no way to expedite this? Not unless you know someone who knows someone, if you catch my drift. He caught it. He also caught the implication that knowing someone who knew someone usually involved the kind of cash that made problems disappear. Cash that truncheon press couldn't spare. Not when every dollar was already reserved for inventory, insurance, first month's rent, and the dozen other expenses that kept materializing like unwelcome party guests. I'll figure something out, he said, which was what he always said, because what else was there to say? That they were hemorrhaging money, that May was circled on the calendar in red ink like a death sentence, that they didn't open by spring, they drowned before they'd even had a chance to prove they could swim. He hung up, tossed the pen onto a stack of invoices crowding his desk, dragged both hands through his hair. Another day, another problem. The New York storefront was supposed to be a dream. Right now, it looked more like a demolition site than occasionally masqueraded as a business plan. Days bled into nights, hunched over blueprint with beer sweating on the table beside him. His inbox filled faster than he could clear it. Authors panicking over edits, vendors demanding deposits, Matthew forwarding spreadsheets at 2 a.m. with notes about cash flow projections and made his stomach clench. Chris nagging about publicity angles when they didn't even have working plumbing yet. It was good, though. exhausting in a way that left him too tired to think, too busy to feel. It kept his head full of numbers and noise, contractors and deadlines, the kind of productive grind that felt like forward motion even when he wasn't entirely sure where he was going. It kept him from thinking about her, mostly. His new apartment didn't help. He looked up the exact distance from his place to hers, the quickest subway routes by car if necessary. 30 minutes, give or take, depending on transfers. He knew it by heart now, like some masochist rehearsing a trip he'd probably never make again. But just in case. The thought arrived unbidden. Just in case of what? Just in case she needed him? Just in case he could swallow his pride? Just in case he was brave enough to risk falling for her all over again, knowing damn well it would end with him heartbroken? He signed a 1-year lease in the East Village, big enough for his books, his coffee maker, and his restless thoughts. High windows that let in too much light, exposed brick that his real estate agent had calling charming, a mattress on the floor because buying a bed frame felt too much like trusting this was permanent. Half-open boxes stacked in the corner like life wasn't ready to unpack. It felt complicated to be back in the city. New York had never been simple for him. Too many memories waited around every corner, ready to catch him off guard. Every apartment he'd ever had here growing up had been temporary. 6 months, maybe less, before Liz moved them again or rent came due. He remembered her boyfriend stumbling in at 3 a.m. reeking of cheap whiskey and cheaper cologne. The string of expletives and that eventually branded him as a kid no one wanted to deal with. That wreckage had finally landed him on Luke's doorstep in Stars Hollow, the closest thing to stability he'd ever had until Philly. But underneath all that mess, the city had at least taught him something important, that you could reinvent yourself as many times as necessary. That anonymity was a kind of mercy that possibilities lived in every subway car and coffee shop if you knew how to look for them. New York didn't care who you used to be, and it was good at letting people disappear. That was what he needed. Noise in the streets, noise in his head, loud enough to drown everything else out. 8 million strangers with their own disasters to carry. He was counting on that, counting on the city to swallow him whole until he could forget what it felt like to hope for things that were never going to happen. He told himself he was fine. After all, he'd built fine before. Philadelphia had been proof of that. Different, less complicated. He'd arrived there angry and defensive, expecting it to disappoint him in the way most places did. But slowly, over a decade, it had worn him down in the best possible way. He'd built something there, real friendships, a reputation that mattered, routines that felt like He built something there, new relationships, a reputation that mattered, routines that felt like choices instead of survival tactics. People trusted him with their words, their manuscripts, their stories. It was the kind of steady he'd never thought he wanted until he had it. It had been enough until Rory came back. 6 months. 6 months was all it had taken to wreck him completely. 6 months of seeing her across desks and coffee shop tables, across bridges, across years that suddenly felt like nothing. 6 months of letting himself believe that maybe, finally, they'd gotten the timing right. And for a moment there, it had been good. Really good. That night in her apartment, talking about her book and life and all the things that they'd missed, watching her face light up when she talked about his work or what she was writing, how she'd lean forward, elbows on the table, completely absorbed in whatever point she was making. Christ, he'd forgotten how much he loved that. How smart she was. How she could take any thread of conversation and spin it into something deeper, more interesting, more real. She'd always seen him, always truly known him, not just as the screwed up kid from Stars Hollow or Luke's nephew or the dropout who couldn't get his shit together. She saw his mind. She saw the writer, the reader, the person who wanted to work hard, to do better. She believed in him before he believed in himself, even after all the years and all the ways he'd let her down. She still looked at him like he was someone worth knowing. And that night, at the wedding, dancing with her, her hand in his, her body close enough that he could smell her shampoo, how she'd smiled up at him, a little shy, a little nervous, like maybe that moment could mean something, like maybe this was the start of their second chance. He wanted to kiss her then. God, he wanted to. But he'd held back. told himself to be smart, not to rush things, to let her set the pace. And then, the night in the apartment, he hadn't meant for anything to happen. He'd gone in determined to keep things professional and light, not to let himself go there. But she looked at him differently that night. Something in her eyes he hadn't seen since they were 17. He tried to hold himself back, to keep distance, but then she kissed him. Finally. And God, her skin against his tongue. Soft and warm and real. The sound she made when he pulled her closer. Her hands curling into his shirt like she needed him. She was like breathing again after years underwater. Something he thought he'd forgotten, but how could he? Not when no one else had ever compared, and never would. Her lips tasted just as sweet as they had back then. Better even, because this time she was choosing it. Choosing him. Or so she thought. He exhaled sharply and let his head fall back against the chair. He hated that one night could unravel a decade of careful distance and hard-won growth. Years of learning to live without her. Years building a life that didn't revolve around Rory Gilmore. Finding meaning in work and purpose in the stories other people told. Being with her again, spending time together, it had felt like coming home after years of being lost. He thought, stupidly, that this was it. That they were finally on the same page, that the universe had stopped screwing with them long enough to let them have this. And then, the bomb had dropped. Because of course, timing had never been on their side. It seemed the universe had cruel sense of humor, insisting that, maybe, some people were only meant to love each other from a distance. Now, here he was, 30-something, back in New York, chasing deadlines and permits while trying to convince himself that exhaustion was just another word for survival. That the ache he was feeling was just the natural byproduct of working 18-hour days and not because he'd been foolish enough to think he could have her again. But he was foolish. He'd always been foolish when it came to her, hadn't he? Foolish at 18 when he treated her like she was just another girl instead of the girl. Foolish when he messed up everything up instead of taking her to prom. When he let his own insecurities turn him into someone cruel and careless with one person who'd seen something in him worth saving. Foolish when he'd flunked out of high school instead of fighting for what mattered. Foolish when he left town without so much as a goodbye, abandoning her like she was just another casualty of his inability to be the person anyone deserved. He'd spent every day since trying to be better, to be worthy. Every sentence he wrote, every manuscript he shaped, every author he helped. Penance. And yet here he was, 3 books later, an expansion on the horizon, and it still wasn't enough. Because of course, it was Logan. It was always Logan, wasn't it? The guy born with an escape hatch for every mistake. A trust fund for every consequence. The guy who could fix things with a checkbook, smooth over disaster with a perfectly worded apology and a private jet to wherever the damage couldn't follow him. He could offer Rory things Jess never could. Stability, privilege, the kind of future that didn't require her to choose between her dreams and her security. And the worst part wasn't even the money. It wasn't the name or the connections or even the effortless way Logan could sweep in and rescue her from whatever mess they'd created together. It was that she had loved him. Really, truly loved him. She had told Jess as much all those years ago, standing in the middle of their open house in Philly like it was some unmovable truth. Like she was apologizing for something that she couldn't control. I can't help it. I'm in love with him. Even now, her words echoed in the quiet moments when his defenses were down. She had chosen Logan. She had looked him in the eye and chosen someone else. Her words were still haunting him to this day. And now there would be a baby, a permanent tie, a living reminder. Her email sat in his inbox like a bruise he couldn't stop pressing. Each reread another small act of self-destruction. She said it was finished, said Logan was part of her past, that things were complicated, that she was figuring it out on her own. Her words had been careful, apologetic, guilty even. But Jess couldn't make himself believe it, not really. She had gone back to Logan before, after cheating, and failed proposals, and what sounded like an affair. He had to protect himself. He knew better this time. But still, he tried to formulate a reply. I'm happy for you, really. Too much of a lie. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Too accusatory. I can't do this anymore. Too honest. Each reply tore apart by the simple fact of her reality. Rory was having Logan's child. No matter how many times he said it in his head, it felt like swallowing glass. And it shouldn't hurt this much. But it did. The last time she broke his heart, he'd handled it like any good 20-something cliche. Whiskey, late nights, women whose names he couldn't remember in the morning. But now he had truncheon. He had purpose. He had work that mattered, work that didn't lie to him or leave him questioning every decision he'd ever made. And yet, there was the manuscript. The damn manuscript she'd sent along with her email. The one he'd asked for, pushed for even. The one that was inevitably about them, her past, her mother, the way their lives had always echoed forward and backward, like into something neither of them ever seemed able to escape. Could he do it? Could he survive reading it? Could he relive all of it? Every mistake, every wrong step, every time he'd fucked up beyond repair and hurt her. The answer came before he even had time to overthink it. Before he even let himself spiral. He forwarded the manuscript to Chris. It was the right thing to do. For her, for himself. Chris would get it to where it needed to go. He couldn't be trusted with something this important. Not now. Jess stared at the screen for a moment after hitting send, his jaw tight. He ran a hand through his hair and leaned back in his chair, letting his decision settle over him. His phone buzzed against the table, and he glanced at the screen. Sarah. Her name lit up in the display with a quiet sort of inevitability. She'd been everywhere lately, her marketing firm handling the entire New York launch with the kind of seamless efficiency that he, reluctantly had to admit, did make his life easier. Press previews, social media buzz, influencer outreach, words that made him regret his every career choice, but Sarah handled them like she was born for it. Every event flyer, every launch day countdown, every punchy press release that somehow didn't make him want to gouge his eyes out. Jess hesitated. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. Jess hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. He could let it go to voicemail. He could pretend he was busy, unavailable, too deep in work to be bothered. But the silence in his apartment was starting to feel oppressive. And Sarah, brisk, confident, refreshingly uncomplicated, sounded like exactly the kind of distraction he needed. He picked up. This is Jess? Hey, Jess, it's Sarah. Got a second? Her voice carried a hint of amusement, like she already knew he'd say yes. If you're about to ask me to change the font on the website again, I swear to God, a laugh on the other end. No fonts, I promise. Well, actually, the header could be a little more. Sarah, fine. No font talk. I have something better. We need to discuss the social media campaign. Jess groaned. Oh, for the love of, are you on Instagram yet? Instagram? Where people post pictures of their food and their dogs and their workouts and their babies and their vacations, and in your case, books. It's a marketing tool, Mariano. If you want people to show up to your overpriced literary den, you need to be where they are. Can't I just throw some flyers around the neighborhood and call it a day? Absolutely not. What is this, 1995? Jess sighed, rubbing his temples. He already could feel the headache forming. Social media makes me feel like I'm being watched. She laughed. That's literally the point. He grunted, already regretting answering the phone. Okay, Sarah continued. We can table the Instagram debate for now. What I actually need is for you to stop obsessing over the store for one night and come out with me. His brow lifted. Come out where? An art gallery opening in Chelsea tomorrow night. I'll even pick you up. You can complain about modern art and I'll complain about the pretentious crowd, and we'll call it a win. He leaned back in his chair, considering. The idea of standing in a whitewashed gallery surrounded by people who said things like juxtaposition made him want to slam his head against the wall. But the silence in his apartment had started to crawl lately. Even his books didn't feel like company anymore. So your plan for getting me out of the store is forcing me into a room full of self-important art critics? Exactly. You get to be your grumpy self. I get to drink overpriced wine and make fun of people who take themselves too seriously. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember that life outside of truncheon's four walls. That's a pretty hard sell, he muttered, but he could feel a corner of his mouth tugging despite himself. You'll survive. Besides, you're a book snob. You'd fit right in with the art snobs. I'm not a book snob, Sarah. I have standards. Right. You just don't see the point of reading anything that doesn't make you question your entire existence. He found himself almost smiling. Exactly. Art should either move you or leave you alone. Not require a PhD to understand why a red square is supposed to represent the human condition. Fine, she laughed. It'll be a pretentious one, and you can roll your eyes dramatically and make sardonic comments under your breath. But seriously, you need a break, Jess. If you keep grinding yourself into the ground like this, you're going to burn out before the doors even open. He paused. Staring at the window across from him, his reflection stared back. Tired, shadowed-eyed, somewhere between mid-30s and lost. He looked like a man who'd been running from something for too long that he'd forgotten what he was running from. I don't know if I deserve a break, he said, quieter now. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Sarah didn't miss a beat. Of course you do. Everyone deserves a break, Jess, especially people who work as hard as you do. He was silent for a beat, mulling over her words. Fine, he said finally, but if anyone starts talking about transformative power of negative space, I'm leaving. Deal. He could hear her smile through the line. And I'll even let you sulk in the corner if the crowd gets too much. And there's wine, right? Jess, it's an art event. The wine is practically mandatory. He exhaled, shaking his head. All right, I'll go. But don't expect me to dress up. Oh, don't worry. I fully expect you to show up looking like an underpaid professor. Ouch. It's a good look on you. He let out a soft laugh despite himself. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, Jess. They hung up and he sat in the quiet that followed. For the first time in weeks, the prospect of stepping away from the grind didn't sound like the worst idea in the world. And going out with Sarah? He wasn't even sure what that meant. A distraction, a step forward, a way to prove himself that he could move on. He ran a hand through his hair and then down his face. He needed a shave, a real meal, something other than espresso and whatever energy bars he'd been surviving on the past week. The gym had become his only routine outside of work. He was hitting it harder lately, trying to push everything through his body, trying to sweat out the relentlessness that had taken up permanent residence in his chest. But some things just didn't leave you that easily. 1 week later. The truncheon storefront looked like a war zone. Jess stood in the middle of what eventually would be the main floor, staring up at the ceiling panel that hung on a precarious 45-degree angle, held in place by what appeared to be a single rusty screw. Exposed wiring dangled below, the smell of sawdust and fresh paint mixed with something vaguely chemical that he was really hoped wasn't toxic. Plastic sheeting covered half the bookshelves. The other half were buried under boxes of inventory that had nowhere to be put. Please tell me that's supposed to look like that. Matthew stood in the doorway, briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other, staring at the ceiling with pure horror. It's not, Jess said flatly. Great, fantastic, love that for us. Chris appeared from the back storage closet they were calling an office until the upstairs was habitable, stepping over a pile of 2x4s. He surveyed the damage with the resigned expression of someone who'd already calculated the cost. So, the good news is the electrician says we're not going to burn the place down. And the bad news, Jess asked, we might collapse it instead. Matthew set his coffee down on a paint-splattered folding table. I'm sorry, what? The weight capacity of the second floor is lower than we thought. We either need to reinforce the beams or cut our upstairs inventory in half. How much does reinforcing cost? Chris pulled out a crumpled estimate from his back pocket and handed it over. Matthew's face went pale. That's more than we budgeted for the entire second floor. Yep. So we're screwed. Pretty much. Jess grabbed the estimate and scanned it. His jaw tightened. We'll figure it out. How? Matthew's voice climbed an octave. We're already over budget. The inspection's delayed. We've got authors expecting their books on shelves in 2 months, and right now we don't even have shelves that won't collapse and kill someone. I said we'll figure it out. Jess's tone left no room for argument. Chris shot him a look. You want to tell us how, or are we just supposed to trust in the magic of your aggressive optimism? I'm working on it. Working on it? Chris crossed his arms. You've been working on it for 3 weeks. Meanwhile, I've got contractors calling me at all hours asking if we want to upgrade to premium drywall, whatever the hell that means. And Matthew's about to have an aneurysm every time he opens the accounting software. Hey, Matthew protested weakly. Am I wrong? No, Matthew admitted, but you didn't have to say it out loud. Jess pinched the bridge of his nose. The headache was back. Look, I know it's a mess, but we've dealt with worse. Have we? Chris gestured at the ceiling panel, which chose that exact moment to creak ominously. Because this feels pretty objectively terrible. The Philly launch? We had working ceilings in Philly. Barely. That's not reassuring. Matthew cleared his throat. Okay, so here's a thought. What if we delay the opening? Push it to July, give ourselves time to actually, not die under a pile of construction debt? No. Jess's response was immediate. Jess, we're opening in May. We've already sent out the invitations. We've got press lined up, authors scheduled. If we delay now, we look like amateurs who can't execute. And if we open with a death trap, Chris shot back, then we die like professionals. Chris stared at him. Then he started laughing. It wasn't a particularly reassuring laugh. You're insane. You know that, right? I've been told. Matthew sighed and picked up his coffee. I'm adding death by falling ceiling to the risk assessment just so we're on the same page. Noted. They stood there for a moment, all three men staring at the construction disaster that was supposed to be their dream, but currently felt like a nightmare. Finally, Chris clapped Jess on the shoulder. All right, I'll call the contractor, see if you can negotiate the beam reinforcement down to something that won't bankrupt us. Thanks. Don't thank me yet. I might just negotiate us into a different kind of bankruptcy. Matthew gathered his things. I've got a meeting with the accountant. If I'm back in an hour, assume I've thrown myself into the Hudson. Will do. As Matthew headed for the door, Chris lingered. He picked up a paint scraper from the table and turned it over in his hands, like he was trying to figure out how to say something he'd been avoiding. Hey, he said finally. Got a minute? Jess glanced up from the estimate he was holding. Yeah, what's up? Chris jerked his head toward the makeshift office. Let's talk in there, away from this death trap. The small, cramped space was barely in better shape than the main floor. Boxes stacked against every wall. A desk buried under dozens of pieces of paper. One working lamp. Chris stepped inside and leaned against the desk, arms crossed. So, I finally had a chance to read over Rory's manuscript. Jess froze. He'd been expecting this conversation eventually, but that didn't make it any easier. Yeah? It's good. Chris paused. Really good, actually. But, what's the deal here? I have no idea you two were back in contact. Jess shrugged, keeping his tone casual. We ran into each other last summer. She was feeling a bit stuck. I gave her some ideas for the book, told her I'd do what I could to help. Uh-huh. Chris's expression made it clear he didn't believe a word. But have you read it? Jess looked away. Chris let out a low whistle. You haven't read it. I forwarded to you for a reason. Right. Chris studied him. Look, man, it's good. I'm excited for it even, and I'll happily take it on, but are you sure? It just feels a little personal. Jess nodded. All the more reason it should be you. She got lucky to have you. Chris didn't move. I didn't realize she was pregnant. The word hit him all over again. Jess's jaw tightened. He looked away, trying to keep his face neutral. She must have written about it. She did. Chris watched him carefully. You knew? Yeah. How are you feeling about that? Jess pulled a box of books off the floor and buried himself in unpacking them. Better than meeting Chris's eye. I'm happy if she's happy. Come on, man, don't bullshit me. I'm not. Oh, come on, man. You've been a mess since January. The bags under your eyes. The fact that you're here at 6 a.m. and don't leave until midnight. You snapped at Rachel yesterday for asking about her cover design. Chris's voice softened. It feels just like last time. Jess's hands stilled on the box. I'm sorry, but did you not notice the ceiling panel that nearly just killed us? Rachel's been hounding me about the cover's fonts for the third time this week while I'm dealing with inspectors and contractors and a building that might collapse. Maybe my agitation has more to do with that, man. Then he stopped, ran a hand through his hair. Than my ex-girlfriend for over a decade ago being pregnant. There was a pause. Chris just watched him, frustration and concern warring on his face. Jess kept unpacking books. I mean, sure, did I maybe think something was happening when we danced together at my uncle's wedding last fall? Or that we were finally on the same page when she kissed me a few months ago? Wait, what? Jess ignored him, the words spilling out now. And of course, I was fucking naive enough to think she could ever really be over that prick. Who? Jess's teeth ground together. Logan. Chris blinked. Oh, you mean Landon. Jess stared at him in confusion. Who? Oh man, you really didn't read it. A smirk tugged at Chris's mouth. She changed all the names in the book. I'm guessing Logan is Landon. There's a Derek, a James. It wasn't hard to read between the lines. Jess rolled his eyes and turned back to the box. Whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is I'm over it and we have bigger things to worry about. You're not over it. Chris, don't. Chris's voice was firm now. I was there last time, remember? After she left and you spent 3 months working yourself into the ground and drinking too much and pretending that you were fine when you clearly weren't? He stepped closer. I'm not watching you self-destruct again. Not over her. Not over anyone. Just set the book down harder than he meant to. I'm fine. No, you're not fine. You haven't been fine since you came back from Connecticut. What do you want me to say? Jess turned to face him, something raw breaking through. That it sucks? That finding out she's pregnant with his kid feels like getting punched in the gut every time I think about it? That I keep replaying the night in her apartment and wondering what the hell I was thinking, letting myself believe we could actually... He stopped, shook his head. It doesn't matter. She made her choice. She always makes her choice, and it's never me. The word hung in the air between them. Chris's expression softened. I'm sorry, man. Don't be. Jess's voice went flat again. Just help her with the book. Make sure she gets a fair deal. She deserves that much. You know I will. Good. Chris hesitated. You're one of my closest friends. You know that, right? I'll always have your back. Just shot him a look. Please don't get all sentimental on me now. We've got too much work to do, okay? Chris smiled despite himself. I'm serious. I'm going to take on Rory's book. It's too good not to, but I'm also going to follow your lead here. If at any point this becomes too much, I'm not going off the rails. Chris held up his hands. Then I'll tell her no, and we'll recommend another publisher. I'm not putting you through this again. You're my friend. She hurt you before, and I'm not willing to watch that happen again. Jess nodded slowly. I appreciate it, but I'm fine, really. Chris studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Okay, but for what it's worth, I think you should read it. Before Jess could respond, the door opened and Sarah walked in. Clipboard in hand, blonde hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. She glanced between them. Am I interrupting? No, Jess said quickly. What's up? Just wanted to go over the event timeline for the launch. I've got the caterer confirmed, the photographer's available, and I sent the final press release to the Times contact you gave me. She smiled at Jess, warmer than strictly professional. Also, I had a really good time the other night. We should do it again sometime. Jess gave her a polite nod. Yeah, sure. Sarah's hand brushed his forearm lightly as she passed him with the clipboard. Great. I'll text you. She left, her heels clicking down the hallway. Chris arched an eyebrow. The other night? It was nothing. Didn't sound like nothing. Jess set the clipboard down without looking at it. Drop it. Does she know it was nothing? Stop. Okay. Chris raised his hands in surrender. I won't say another word, but if we lose our PR coordinator because you broke her heart, I'll kill you, man. Noted. Chris headed for the door, then stopped. He looked back at Jess, something serious in his expression. I mean it, though, about reading the manuscript. I think you should. Jess didn't answer. Chris left, closing the door behind him. Jess stood there in We're so close. Jess stood there in the quiet office, surrounded by boxes and unfinished work. He pulled out his phone, opened his email, stared at Rory's name in his inbox, then he closed it. There was a ceiling to fix, a business to save, a future to build that had nothing to do with the wreckage of his past. He just had to keep telling himself that until it was true. That night, Jess lay on his mattress on the floor, staring at the high windows where the city light bled through. His phone sat beside him. He couldn't sleep. Big surprise. Despite the exhaustion in his very bones, his mind wouldn't shut off. Not after today's disaster. Not with the mental checklist running on a constant loop. They'd built Truncheon from nothing once. They could do it again. They had to. But Matthew was right. There was no way they'd make their opening date at this rate. Too ambitious, too soon, too much going wrong. It would take a miracle. He stared at his phone before picking it up. His thumb scrolled through his contacts until it landed on Luke's name. He wasn't sure why he felt the sudden need to call. It wasn't like Luke could fix any of this, but he needed to hear a familiar voice, someone who got it. He pressed call. Jess? Luke answered on the second ring, sounded slightly shocked. Everything okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Just wanted to check in. At 9:30 on a Tuesday? Jess almost smiled. Can a guy call his uncle? Sure, when that guy isn't you. But Luke's tone was light, almost amused. Hold on. Shuffling, a door closing, the faint sound of a TV cutting out, Lorelai protesting in the background. Okay, what's going on? Nothing, just seeing how things are. How's the diner? Same as always, steady. Caesar's trying to add some crazy new breakfast burrito thing to the menu with pineapple. The town's up in arms. He paused, but you didn't call to ask about the diner. Jess exhaled. Luke had always been able to read him. How's the new store coming? Luke asked, his voice softer now. It's fine. Good. When he didn't elaborate, Luke pressed. Jess? It's a disaster. He ran a hand through his hair. The floors are shot. The stairs are a hazard. We've got structural issues we didn't budget for, and we're supposed to open in 2 months. A pause. Luke absorbed what he was hearing. How can I help? Thanks, but I don't think there's really much you can do, not unless you can get our contractors to actually show up or bribe the inspector. I don't know about the inspectors, but I do know floors and stairs and plumbings and general woodworking. Luke's voice was matter of fact. Send me pictures. I'll bring what I need. It's fine, Luke. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Jess hesitated. Asking for help had never come easy, but Luke always offered anyway, even when Jess knew he didn't deserve it. That would actually... Yeah. Thank you. He nodded to himself, almost feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. We'll pay for all the materials and you'll have a place to stay, hopefully just a few days, 3 tops. It's no problem. I'm happy to help. Luke said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. You sure? Of course. When do you need me? Jess bit back the word immediately. Whenever works for you. I'll make it work. Email me the address and what needs doing. Don't want to forget any tools. Thanks, Luke. He tried to keep his voice steady. I really appreciate it. I'm proud of you. You know that. What you're building, it's a big deal. Jess didn't trust himself to respond right away. His throat felt tight. Yeah, well, it'll be a bigger deal if we actually open. Luke laughed. You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. That's what you do. A brief, quiet, comfortable, like the hundreds of early mornings they'd spent together at the diner before it opened. Luke prepping coffee while Jess read at the counter. Everything else okay? Luke asked. You sound Tired. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Just long days. Hang in there. You've done this before. You could do it again. Thanks. Lorelai's actually heading into the city in a few days to see Rory. I'll just ride in with her. Maybe a long weekend? Make a long weekend of it. Jess's heart rate suddenly kicked up at the sound of her name. He hesitated, trying to sound indifferent, before failing completely. How is she? He cleared his throat. Rory, I mean. Have you heard from her at all? Luke was quiet for a second too long. So I guess you know. It wasn't a question. Jess sighed, rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. Yeah, I know. Luke didn't say anything for a minute. Then, I think she's doing okay, all things considered. A bit scared, but she's putting on a brave face for her mom. He paused, anger simmering beneath the words. Man, if I ever get that entitled yacht club pretty boy again, I might strangle him with my bare hands. Jess huffed a bitter laugh. Yeah, I know what you mean. She'd probably like to hear from you, Luke said carefully, treading through dangerous territory. If you think... He trailed off. Jess knew that Luke knew. That Luke had always known. That his feelings for Rory were permanent, carved into him like his own name in wet concrete. Yeah, Jess said, his throat tight. I know, I'm working on it. Okay. Luke's voice was gentle and understanding. Just don't wait too long, all right? I won't. Good. And Jess, yeah, it's going to be okay. All of it. Jess nodded even though Luke couldn't see him. Yeah, thanks, Luke. Anytime, kid. They hung up. Jess sat in the quiet, staring at his phone. Luke was coming. They'd figure out the repairs. The business would survive. It had to. But Lorelai was going to go see Rory, which meant Rory was still in the city. She hadn't gone back to Stars Hollow, or worse, flown off to London to be with Logan. The thought of her being alone with all of this made him feel sick. His guilt flared up, winning over every other complicated emotion. And he hadn't said a word to her in weeks. He fell back onto his mattress, stared at the empty white ceiling. Was she okay? Was she eating enough, sleeping? Had she even told Logan? Was she really scared like Luke had said? He wanted to know everything and nothing. Wanted to be there for her and wanted to disappear completely. To stop feeling this crushing longing that made every day without her feel like holding his breath underwater. And he had made the right call. Sending that manuscript to Chris instead of answering her directly. Was that the professional thing to do? The mature thing? He thought he was doing her a favor, giving her book the best shot without his influence muddying the waters. But maybe it was just another way of running. He should text her, call her, show up at her apartment with apologies and promises he wasn't sure she'd ever even see or want to hear. But what good would any of that do? She had bigger problems than his unresolved feelings. Finally, he picked up his phone and opened his messages again. He stared at Rory's name. The last text from her was from back in January. Just her address sent right before he came over. Sent just before everything fell apart. He started typing, deleted it, started again. Finally, he wrote something simple, unsure of what else to say, of what could ever be enough. I hope you're okay. I want you to know I think about that night constantly. I'm sorry I walked away. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. He hit send before he could change his mind. Then he set his phone down and waited in the dark, knowing she might not ever respond, knowing it might already be too late, knowing that he didn't deserve her forgiveness because he'd still been too much of a coward to say what really mattered, that she still mattered, that she always would. We made it! Okay, that is the end of chapter 6. Sorry, that was a little bit rougher. I haven't eaten today, and it's been a very long day. But hopefully it wasn't too bad. I'm gonna go eat, I promise. I'm gonna actually be seeing you guys later. And then this will be given to you tomorrow. So I love you. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for being just wonderful and patient and incredible. And I love your guts. And okay.